We always say, like, obviously, we focus a lot our data on orgasms and why we have a lot of focus and interest in it. Obviously, yes, the orgasms are not the end all be all, but at the same time, yeah, I would love for people with vulvas to have more orgasms and experience like a life where they feel like they can have it and one that they also deserve it. So it's a fine line that we toe, I think, because obviously we don't want to make people feel isolated if you're not having orgasms. But I very much believe in the world of yeah, there's clearly an orgasm gap, and I would love for people to have the opportunity to have orgasms.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Sexology Podcast. I am so excited to welcome Anna Lee to our show. She's a co founder and CEO of Lioness. Anna, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone.
I am so excited about this conversation. Just before we started recording, I was sharing with Anna that how many years ago I started seeing them at our sex therapy conferences, ASAC. And at first time I saw the sex toy, I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. I saw it gather data, and then I've been seeing them in our conferences all the time. And I was sharing with Anna, it's wonderful to see a company female founded in a sexual health kind of industry being able to thrive. So congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. It's definitely been a long journey. ASEC is a wonderful conference that we do every year. It's a nice like gathering of people who love sex and science and research and all of that. So it's always been such a great place that has really cheered us on from the get go. So yeah, I love it. And yeah, it's been a long journey to get to where we are today.
That is incredible. Uh, Tell us, how did you get interested in being part of Lioness? I know that you
Yeah.
work at tech companies, like done really great things. And I can imagine that was a pivot. So tell us more
Yeah,
about that.
100%. Yeah, I definitely didn't grow up being like, like as a kid being like, when I grow up I want to build vibrators for a living or anything like that. I grew up in a really conservative religious family. I grew up in Korea till I was 7 and we never ever talked about sex, and I was very much in this idea of that if you masturbate or you experience pleasure, especially as a woman, like that you go to hell, like just all these things that I think was such a negative impact on my childhood and just feeling very comfortable with my own body. And when we came to the US, I really like pursued this idea of the American dream for my parents of like getting a corporate job and all of that. And I fell in love with engineering, mechanical engineering. And then so I worked at Amazon after I graduated. That I really thought that's where I was gonna be. Like I was like, I've made it. I've made this American dream. I'm going to be in this cubicle for the rest of my life. And one of the like funny life instances is just realizing, I think a few years in of like, is this like when you're 21 and you've like made this thing that you've been trying to accomplish your whole life? Like, is this where it ends? Like, is this the farthest you go in terms of things that you're passionate about? And I started realizing a new passion of like, realizing that when we engineer products, a lot of the times products are not engineered with women in mind. As much as they say it's unisex, or even if they say it's a woman's product, I think a lot of times the engineers that work behind the project isn't someone that is going to be the ones using the product or really think about it from an intentional perspective. And I was really lucky. I met a founder of a different sex toy company. The company doesn't exist anymore. But it was this guy, and I was like, how do you know what you're building like works? Like, how do you know this works for women and people with vulvas? And he was like, there's this industry standard where you put the vibration on your nose, and that's what a clitoris feels like. And I remember just being like, all of those moments in your life where a toy doesn't work for you or something doesn't work, and you're like, something's wrong with me. I'm broken. Everyone has said the sex toy works, but why doesn't it work for me? I realized like maybe it just hasn't been made with like women in mind a lot of times. And the further I looked into the sex toy industry, I just realized how male dominated historically it had been. And so it just kind of created this like huge mix of wanting to build products that made sense for me, and it was also just a journey for me to feel really comfortable in my body and like learning about what I liked and what would I want to see in the world. And it just became like this beautiful mixture, which all sounds like it fell into perfect slots now, like 10 years later. But at the time, it was just like this chaotic mix of like exploring interests, exploring curiosities, exploring healing for myself. And it just kind of how Lioness came to be.
Well, I love that kind of honesty he brought in, like put it on your nose and
Yeah.
that's
Oh
how
my
I
gosh.
feel.
I will tell you, like, even sex toy conferences now, and I understand what they're meaning to say. It's like because you have more nerves on your nose, or they'll say the skin between your thumb and your pointer finger. But it's just a interesting thing to me. Like, it's beyond just nerve endings, and there's so many things that go along with it. I just think it's such a silly comparison thing to do. But you'll still see it at like sex toy conferences to this
That
day.
is so interesting. And I think it's something about when you have certain type of body, I
Yeah.
think you can design it best for those body. I think it's safe to
Totally.
say that like the nuances, how bodies are different, what feels comfortable, even kind of the sensory experiences. And I'm sure that there are focus groups, there are kind of like people that give reviews, but I think there is something about like kind of having this in kind of internal experience of what you're looking
Yeah.
for in a product. And I am at wow of like the pivot that you made. I can imagine a woman of color having an amazing job making and saying, "Oh, I'm gonna go now explore creating sex toys or part of this
Yeah.
journey." How was that? Like, was that well received?
Oh, that's a good question. I think at the time, like, I really do, a part of it is a little bit of fearlessness. A little bit is being naive. I was like in my early 20s and I was like, what is, I have all this time and opportunity. Let me just try. So I think I didn't really think that deeply about it when it happened. And I was like, I'm just not going to take pay for like 2 years, see what happens. And, like I can live with as many roommates as I need to. I can live off rice, like all these different things. I was like more willing, I think, when I was really young. But I actually didn't tell my parents for about a year when I quit. And because I knew that it would, one, it would be a really difficult conversation. And two, I knew they wouldn't receive it really well. And I like never had to talk to them about sex before. And so I was like, I don't know how they're gonna feel that I'm working on something like this. And it was only when my mom came to visit me in SF and she was like, because I was like not responding as often because I was so busy trying to make the startup happen. And she was like, I'm gonna come visit. I want to see if you're okay. And then I remember being like, this is the moment I have to tell her because she's gonna see our office, she's gonna see my house, like broken down vibrators everywhere, like vulva and vagina models just everywhere. And so I remember she came and I was like, hey, like I need to tell you something. Like I need to tell you that I'm working on this sex toy. But I told her how meaningful and important it was for me because I was like, there was like some sexual trauma that had happened when I was a kid that my mom knew of. And I was like, I just need to do this to feel like confident in my own self. Like it's a journey for me to feel like I understand and I feel have full power over my body. And she was really quiet. And I really was like, she's gonna yell at me for like the next week. I just know it. And she was like, like when I was younger, I used to have a vibrator. And I was like, oh.
Good
And
for
then
her.
yeah, and then for the next hour, we talked about our sex lives, like when we had sex for the first time, just like experiences and questions we've always had about our own bodies. And it was such a beautiful experience, something that I never thought I would do with my mom. With that said, also a little disgusting. Like talking about sex with your parents is always going to have a little tinge of like, things you didn't really wanna know, but I was so grateful that she responded in that way, and I tell people to this day, like, I really think if my mom could open up and she could be that open about her experience, like, I really think everyone has the power to feel so comfortable with their body and, like, come around to being like, it doesn't have to feel like a sin, it doesn't have to feel like it's taboo or anything. So, yeah, I feel really, like, happy with how it happened, but, yeah, I was scared. There's only been, like, 3 times in my life I been really scared of my mom, like, when I got my first tattoo, like, all these things, but that was one of them for sure. I was like, "Ah, she's gonna kill me."
That's awesome that she was open and she took
Mhm.
that risk of talking about her own experiences and what does it mean for her for uh like having kind of sharing this with you because there's a possibility kind of she had an option of holding back which is really good that she showed vulnerability. And I think sometimes when it comes to sexual health conversations we have this expectation of how people will react, And
Mhm.
that's like people at times they can surprise you. I see it all the time in my practice. People say, "Oh, when you're talking as a psychologist about sex, like, does it make people uncomfortable?" But majority of time, my experience is when I make the invitation for people to talk about their sex life, they're actually relieved. They want to talk about it because they
Yeah.
want to. There are not that many spaces that they can talk about these things. And what if they feel like most important thing, in my perspective, that's missing in the experience of many women when it comes to sexual health is experiencing orgasm equality. Like it's
Mhm.
very rare for penis owners to feel that okay, I'm not experiencing not orgasms. Like majority of time they do, but as you know, that for female like vulva owners, it can be a infrequent experience or non-existent for many people. One of the common question whenever I talk about orgasm, and I'm sure you get it as well, is that people want to know what's really going on in your body, in your brain when it comes to orgasms.
Oh yeah, that's such a great question. I agree. Like I think it's probably the question we get the most is like what actually happens in an orgasm or what does it feel like? And so I think with Lioness, what one of the big things we knew, there's limited research in physiological sexual function of what happens during an orgasm, but one of the things that we really built the product off of was we know that, for example, we knew that your heart rate increases, your pupils dilate, you get a little bit of sweat on your body, you get vaginal moisture, like all these little parts, blood flow to the clitoris, all these things. But one of the things we knew that we could measure really well, and something that's been cited in research since the 1980s, is that there's an involuntary pelvic floor contraction that happens. And it's a very unique pattern that happens during the orgasm. Typically, what's been recorded is a very rhythmic squeeze and relax. So you're squeezing, relax, squeeze, relax. And it's usually 1 to 2 hertz in terms of frequency. So that's originally what we based the research on and our product on is that it's measuring those involuntary pelvic floor contractions. But actually, one of the most fun things that I always love to tell people is like, the coolest thing I think about orgasms and really like a person I love dearly is Dr. Nan Wise, who's a neuroscientist, and then Dr. Barry Kamasurak, who has been researching what happens within the brain during an orgasm, what parts of the brain light up, and all these things. And they did this incredible research where they were having people in fMRI head scans, and they're seeing what the brain's doing during an orgasm. And they've seen just incredible things where your entire brain lights up like a Christmas tree, and just everything is firing at the peak of the orgasm, and then it completely dims down after an orgasm. So that's always something that I love to tell people, like, even if you're not physically feeling an orgasm, there's so many things in your brain that's happening. Even if you're touching things like your chest, your throat, your nipples, the reason why all of those things I think have like nipple orgasms and all of that is because it's firing all those things in your brain. So yeah, there's so many things that happen. Obviously for us, like as Lioness, like we love to say one of the things we're really helping people indicate is those pelvic floor contractions that are happening. And we've seen 3 unique patterns that happen during the orgasm, and then what the way that you do squeeze and relax. But there's so many things happening within your body. But I think it's difficult. I think if we always tell people like, think about the last time you had an orgasm, what did that feel like? It's such a rush of the things that are happening that it's hard to like split out all the different things. But there's a lot of things that I think happen during an orgasm, and it's what makes it so fun to explore because it's been so little explored. And we always, I think now something that we love to really try to understand is like, what do we define as the beginning and the end of an orgasm versus like what you're feeling versus physiologically what's happening and all of that. So a lot to be explored, but that's always like the my favorite things to talk about is like the brain and then the pelvic floor contractions.
I love that we had Dr. Nan on our show. I love
Ah,
her personality and all the great
incredible.
research that she
I could talk
does.
to her for hours. She's just such a wealth of information, and I just love the way she talks about pleasure and why it's so important to a human life and like what it means as an overall well-adjusted human being. Like I think it's incredible.
I love that she talked about, like, about her research. She talks about how people who have better sex life, they earn more.
Mm.
And I
Oh,
use it all the time
interesting.
with my clients. What I appreciate about the kind of concept of orgasm that you mentioned, there's like this subjective experience and there's an
Mhm.
objective experience of like that you can gather data around it. Tell us like how would you guys kind of like, I know that you guys have a device, right? There's a Bluetooth device connected to the sex toy. Can you see the intensity of the orgasms? Have you guys collected data on what makes an orgasm more intense?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, so we have force sensors. There's two force sensors on the shaft of the Lioness. So it's an insertable rabbit style vibrator. So what we're measuring is how strong you're squeezing on both sides of the device, and then we basically average it out to make sure one that there's no noise that we're capturing. So if you're moving it around and all of that, we're going to cancel that noise out because what we're really focused on is those pelvic floor contractions. I believe, if I'm remembering from the top of my head, the average force during an orgasm tends to be around 72 gram force. 72 gram force doesn't really mean anything to most people. Like how can I tell you what it was? But I always tell people it's about the force to snap a skinny hot Cheeto. If you're familiar with the snap, like if you have your finger and you snap it like this, it's about that force. So it's not as strong as I think what most people think it's happening. Obviously, the pelvic floor muscles in your anal, if you're having an orgasm through your anal, so if you have the device in there, it'll be much stronger, mainly because the anal sphincter muscles are much stronger. For us, one of the main things we're looking at is duration of the orgasm. So what we see as the beginning and end, or what you mark as the beginning and end, how strong it is. And those are two of the big factors we would say like we measure in terms of quote unquote good orgasm versus a quote unquote typical orgasm. Obviously, there's so many things in terms of experience and how it was for you from a mental standpoint, all of those things. Like, for example, for me, during if I drink alcohol and I use the Linus, the orgasms itself with alcohol will be tends to be a little bit longer and a little bit stronger. But
Oh,
personally, to
interesting.
me, I would say it doesn't feel as not good for me. Like it takes one a really long time for me to get there because it's just trying to concentrate and you're a little bit buzzed and all of these things. So it's not the end all be all. Like numbers aren't going to be your like 100% thing of like this was really good or this is really bad, but it does help you guide in terms of oh yeah, this felt like a very like much longer experience or a deeper sensation and things like that.
That is such a great experience for me also. When I drink, it's harder to experience orgasm. I'm relatively
Yeah.
orgasmic and it doesn't feel as intense. But I think cannabis is different. Have you guys did research on cannabis?
Yes. So I always tell people if the in the 10 years we've been doing this, the three things I just will stand by of the things that can really help enhance your orgasms is cannabis, edging, and caffeine. So the three things I've
Mm.
seen just the intensity and the length of orgasms. Cannabis is such a I think there's now research coming out more and more about how much cannabis can help with people that have difficulty having orgasms or just having better orgasms as a whole. I think personal anecdote of like me experimenting or sex experimenting with like different cannabis lubes or edibles and things like that and seeing how my orgasm change, it has such a huge impact. We did like a little marketing study with 20 women that we sent out. We partnered with a cannabis delivery company called Ease, and we sent out cannabis to Lioness users, and they tried it. And yeah, it just we saw typically longer, stronger orgasms. So I think there's something very special with cannabis, and that is really worth being explored. I think again in a space that's a bit of a taboo on it, depending especially on what area of the world you live in. But I think there's something very special there. Yeah, I'm always like, if I always tell people if you're in a legal state and you're open to using it, I think it has one of the most interesting effects on orgasms.
I had unexpected result from it. We both are in California. In
Hmm.
California, it's legal. So I get samples all the time for kind of
Yeah.
like sex products. And one of the thing was kind of cannabis. I was like, okay, I mean, like, let's see what's going to happen. And I was shocked at how
Yeah.
powerful it was. I was like, usually I'm one and done. I was experiencing multiple orgasms. I
Yes.
ended up not doing sponsorship with the company because of like the complexity of like I'm licensed, it's cannabis.
Yeah.
But I always am surprised on how effective it can be for people who are um, okay with the kind of having cannabis as part of their lifestyle. Uh,
Totally.
yeah, it can be very powerful. And I think it's just like the multiple orgasm piece also was very, very interesting. Um, with caffeine, I read about it, but maybe I'm a high consumer of caffeine. Is there any best practices if you want to use it for stronger
Oh,
orgasms?
yeah, that's a great question. I'm pretty sensitive to caffeine. I drink coffee every day, but I would say like 1 or 2 cups a day. To me, and it might actually even be something with like doing it in the morning versus the nighttime, because typically at nighttime I'm not drinking caffeine. But I've been really actually exploring with a brand called Neurogum. It's like a neuromint. It has caffeine in it and it also has like L-theanine and like all these things that help. And it focuses me in like just a little, like the perfect amount, and just gives a little boost of caffeine. And that's actually been really interesting for me. It just gives like it's kind of like the opposite of cannabis for me. Like cannabis gives you this like very like in your space, like deep sensations where you're really just like in another dimension in some way. And then caffeine kind of gives you this like alertness where you are very focused on your pleasure and like what you're feeling, the different sensations and things like that. I would say like it's two different ways of experiencing pleasure, but I think caffeine just gives me, it's more of my vibe. I think, I mean, obviously I like love really being analytical about my pleasure and all of that, and thinking about what I liked, what I didn't like, and it just gives me the sense of perkness that I'm really, really into. And we do these thing called sex experiments of the month. So every month we launch a sex experiment for our Linus users to try, and caffeine was one of them. And we've seen the orgasms be a little bit longer, much stronger. Yeah, so there's something very interesting there, I think, in terms of caffeine. There hasn't been a lot of research in it, but it's always my also like my go-to one if people are like, what should I try with that's like really accessible, that's a fun sex experiment for me to try and explore with. I always tell people like edging, caffeine. Like those are the two things I would say are really fun, very accessible things to try for your pleasure.
I love that. And with edging is for people who are not familiar, it's like delaying the orgasm, like coming to the
Mhm.
kind of so and so edge and then kind of delaying it. Does that intensify the orgasm? What's the best practices when it comes to edging?
Yeah, so edging is so it's so like we've seen over and over again in our sex experiments, the longer you take to get to an orgasm, it's gotten much, much stronger, much, much longer, and typically multiple orgasms that happen. And we've seen this from user to user to user. Typically, the way that we recommend edging is you're getting really close to an orgasm. So if you're using the Linus, you'll see kind of like where you're at a peak and you're kind of seeing this quieting moment of your body really tensing up, and you want to just pull back completely. Whatever is going to take you to fully not go over the edge. So whether it's turning the motor off, taking the Linus out, the vibrator out, or whatever it is to really pull yourself away. And then once you're ready, you rebuild that. You're rebuilding that sensation again and getting really close to the edge again, and then really just pulling away everything. Um, I think there's something very powerful in the time you're spending on your pleasure and just really doing that build up. I presented at a local event we did in San Francisco, and Dr. Carol Queen was there. And she's a wonder, also an incredible wealth of knowledge. I could listen to her for hours. She came up to and talked to me, and she's like, "I'm so glad you talked about taking your time to get to your pleasure, because somehow in this world we've talked so much about like faster is better, like getting to an orgasm the fastest is the best." But she was like, I just know the longer you take your time, it just shows better pleasure. And that's exactly what we've seen as well. And so I'm always a huge advocate, like, take your time, like enjoy this experience, start from taking a bath, like things that just bring pleasure in your life that doesn't have to be sexual, and then just building it up from there. So yeah, time is it's kind of the best contributor to better pleasure.
Which is opposite of what people think, right? They
Yeah.
think about there is this arousal gap between if you have a you have sex with penis owners, right? That like you
Mhm,
want to get there
mhm.
quicker, and then whatever it takes to build that arousal. So what I'm hearing though, if it's like a edging and delaying, it can kind of like make the experience richer and more stronger for people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny too. I was just reading one of the research papers, I think it was done in 2017. And it was about the orgasm gap, the frequency of orgasms between hetero, bisexual, gay women and men. And it's really interesting because for bisexual and heterosexual women in the research, they've seen like the optimal time for people that were more likely or always have an orgasm is 30 to 60 minutes. And then I think it was like 60 minutes plus, like the longer usually is like more likely to have an orgasm. And then for hetero men, we see like it was, I think, 15 to 30 minutes is like the optimal time. And then the worst being 60 minutes or more. So I think already there's a little bit of a mishmash, especially for heterosexual partners, in just the time to have more orgasms and things like that. So I think timing is such an interesting thing to talk about in terms of like what each person prefers and in your relationship, what people prefer and all of that.
I love that. And kind of like it, like anything else, that if you can kind of like slow down and
Hmm.
kind of invest and pay attention to, it can pay off like any other type of investment.
Yes.
One thing that I've been seeing a lot, that I'm sure you did in the last few years, is rise of orgasm, kind of the kind of clitoral balms, things that kind of like create orgasm. They say, it heightened sensation, like orgasm gels. What do you think about those?
Hmm. Ooh, I honestly I don't know too much about them. It's something that I've always been curious about. I think there are definitely products out there that could work. It kind of bases on a lot of the things that have been known to be either aphrodisiacs or anything that brings blood flow to the clitoris. I think is also very impactful. We've seen them with pumps and different things like that. So we know that if there's something that encourages blood flow or sensation, like even things that are like that have like the minty or like the cooling sensation, I
Mm.
think it works because you're bringing blood flow and you're bringing sensation to that area. The only qualms I have about, I think, those kinds of serums and things like that, I think also it's so worth noting that pleasure really works when one, you invest in time into being like, I'm going to have better pleasure. I'm going to focus on my pleasure. And then two, placebo effects of that you're buying this thing, you're investing your time into it, you're saying like, "Yes, I'm really gonna focus on my pleasure." I think those are all incredible things, that are worth really focusing on and not knocking. Anything that makes you focus in your kind of ritual of like, "Yeah, this is how I'm gonna get to a place that feels really good for me," and investing in myself, taking care of my body, I think that's incredible. The only things I have qualms in terms of like, I think there's not enough research. So there's one of those things that, yes, it could absolutely work. There are a lot of things that do work, especially in like Eastern medicine, all of these things, I think 100%. The only things I don't love are things that I think kind of take the insecurity that a lot of, especially people, vulvas and women have already about whether you're take quote unquote taking too long to get to an orgasm, you can't have one, or you're not feeling pleasure, or you're not quote unquote wet enough. I think those things when we take it, or the other one of being like that you smell bad down
Mhm.
there. I think anything those where you're if they're advertising it in a way that is really attacking on insecurities and taboos that women already have and that culture has built up. Those are things that I'm not huge fans of. But otherwise, I love the idea of experimenting and seeing what works for you, what different elements of things that could work, and different ingredients that we haven't, I think, in Western medicine have fully studied, but things that might work for you. And I think those are incredible.
I love that you're creating this platform for people to talk about it with experimentation, using the data
Hmm.
part, because I feel like, as you said, like so many companies take advantage of people's insecurity, the wanting to have better sex life, and kind of like feeling that you need this because you're broken. Instead of
Yeah.
kind of empowering people, it's a tool for you to gather information and kind of experiment with things. Since you guys gather lots of data, what's been something unexpected that you discovered doing these data gathering in the orgasm realm?
Yeah, there's so many things that I've been like so excited about learning. There's so many. I might just name like some of my top facts and I won't go too deep into detail, but one is for sure the orgasm patterns. So, as I previously said, the most cited thing in terms of an orgasm is this very rhythmic squeeze and relax that happens. We found two other patterns that really correlate to an orgasm that we identify as a different pattern that happens. So the rhythmic one, we call it the ocean pattern. It's the most common. And then there's the avalanche. it starts much higher in force during the orgasm. You still have the squeeze and relax, but it goes down in force over time. So it slopes downwards. And then we have the volcano pattern, which is the rarest one we've seen. But it's really how like movies show what an orgasm looks like. It's like very quiet and then a huge explosion of force and then a huge drop in force, less of like a rhythmic pattern that happens. That's been probably one of the coolest things we've been like giving people to like explore, like think about what pattern you might be, see what like maybe you can change from pattern to pattern and things like that. We work with an incredible pelvic floor therapist, and she actually published a paper that she presented at ASEC. It was from D Hartman, and she said, "Do does orgasms change during age ranges and things like that?" So she looked at our orgasm data from different age range of people that use it, and she saw that I think it was 50-plus-year-old women have stronger orgasms,
Oh, I
and
love that
then
data.
yeah, and then the 30s to 40s have take longer to get to an orgasm, but they have longer orgasms. So it's just kind of I thought it was a wonderful paper because I think we don't often focus on like the 50 plus women community. And I was like, dude, as you get older, you have better, stronger orgasms. Like that's
Sign me
incredible. That's
up.
like something we don't talk about enough. So I think that's really incredible. And then one of the things we learned from early days, which totally makes sense to me now in terms of how interconnected your entire body is. And I think incredible sexologists like you and what we talk about all the time is your pleasure is so interconnected to your overall wellness, like why it's so important to experience pleasure in your life and sexual pleasure and all of that. We had a person that had a concussion and she saw her orgasm data, the pelvic floor contractions completely flatline. And she was like, something's wrong with my vibrator. And we realized that the vibrator was working fine. It was actually just something in the misconnection to the brain from the traumatic brain injury to her orgasms just completely flatlining. And then as she got physical therapy for her concussion, she saw that orgasm data pattern come back. And so it's something that we love to talk to people of like, I think a lot of times, especially for women, if you can't or have an orgasm all of a sudden, they're always like, oh, it's because you're in your head or, like you're mentally blocked or whatever the case. But I think there's so much overall health implications that it can mean as well. And I say it for penis owners all the time. Like, if you go into a doctor's office and a penis owner is like, I'm having erectile dysfunction, the first thing they check for is cardiovascular disease. They check for all these different things that could cause erectile dysfunction. But we don't really have the same for when people with vulva say, like, hey, I'm suddenly not experiencing orgasms. Then it's very much always chalked up to like it's in your head, which, yes, the mind is very powerful for especially people with vulvas to have orgasms. But I think there's so much importance on what it means for your overall wellness, your overall health, what it could mean for, yeah, like what it can mean for your overall wellness.
I agree with you that I think like sometimes when we don't have answers, like I think anything kind of physiologically related, it's all in your head. And I think
Yeah.
what now they're having data, right, on kind of like your orgasm pattern, what's happening, or other data as we do psych assessment with people, it can
Mhm.
help us to get kind of concrete information of what to tackle. Because when you're kind of like putting this label that this is all in your head, it just doesn't give people pathway and roadmap
Yeah.
to be able to have kind of like the experiences that they want. And one thing that I at times don't like when it comes to orgasms is that people say like it's about the journey, not the destination. 100% I agree, but I feel like there is this underlying message that women need to settle for
Mhm.
sexual experiences that does not include orgasm. So I feel also that's one of those things that I don't know. I love the messaging.
Yeah, oh, thank you. Yeah, I we always say like obviously we focus a lot our data on orgasms and why we have a lot of focus and interest in it. Obviously, yes, the orgasms are not the end all be all, but at the same time, yeah, I would love for people with vulvas to have more orgasms and experience like a life where they feel like they can have it and one that they also deserve it. So it's a fine line that we toe, I think, because obviously we don't want to make people feel isolated if you're not having orgasms. But I very much believe in the world of yeah, there's clearly an orgasm gap, and I would love for people to have the opportunity to have orgasms.
Absolutely. It's like one of the highlights of my life is the experiences that I have around orgasm. And
Yeah,
I want other women to have
I
those
agree.
experiences.
And there's like I want people to explore for the rest of their life. Like explore what like be curious about your body. It's forever changing. So be curious about like how does caffeine impact it? How does stress impact it? How does doing it, if I'm a nighttime person, what happens if I do it on the morning time? Like, I think those are such cool, curious things to learn about your body. We always say, like, if I can say one single pill solution for having better orgasms and sex, I always say, like, knowledge. Like, it's knowledge is pleasure. The more you learn about your body, the more you know how your body works. Like, that's going to be the thing that really makes for incredible pleasure in your life.
Awesome. Well, as you know that you have a lot of questions I sent you.
Yeah.
We're toward the end of our time. So if our listeners, they want to learn more about you, about the kind of lioness, what are some of the places you recommend them to look into?
Yes. So, absolutely on our website, lioness.io, and that's lioness like a female lion. We post blogs, and then if you sign up for a newsletter, we send out, I think we send 2 articles out every single week of just things that we're learning, things we find interesting, all within the world of sex. So you should absolutely sign up for a newsletter there. And then also our social. I have my personal social, which is for Instagram is Anna is average, and I also just post like fun things I've been exploring with my own body, things I'm learning that I think is really interesting. And then our social for our company is Linus Health everywhere, like Instagram, Twitter, all of that.
I love that. I'll definitely look into all the additional resources that you mentioned.
Yes.
It was definitely a pleasure to have you on the show. I hope I'll see you more in future events, and you're always welcome to come back.
Yes. Thank you so much. This is so lovely. Thank you for having me.